going to watch a discuss and then watch a IHI video on vaccinations, what's new. Although new with vaccinations can vary. This video, I believe, was shot in May or June, so just kind of a heads up on that. But our staff are here to discuss some other potential future endeavors near the end of today's session. We're going to discuss staff morale, get to discussing our PIP. Our team has come up with some wonderful resources to share with you on this topic. And like I said, if we have time, we'll have a brief vaccination presentation near the end of today's session. So I'm going to actually pass it over to Kelly to discuss some of our pre-video questions. And Casey, if you want to advance to the first. Great, thank you. Kelly, all yours.
Thanks, Sarah. Hello, everyone. I hope you had a great past few days this week, and I hope your vaccination numbers are slowly but surely increasing. I know it's been a struggle with a lot of the facilities that I've been working with here recently, and trying to come up with new ways to encourage and promote the vaccine. There are lots of resources out there and available to you and your staff, so please be aware of that. And so, as always, we have a couple of questions to kind of get your mind spinning before we get on this video. The first one is, how does your leadership team receive up-to-date information regarding the vaccines? As Sarah mentioned in the video, it is a little dated, so just know that there is ever-changing information out there, and if you have that gateway or that resource to push that information out. You know, the next question. How do you then notify your staff, residents, and family members about these updates? As I mentioned in the very beginning, I know that there is quite the challenge in getting some staff members vaccinated. I think that overall the residents in nursing facilities has been pretty high percentage, but staff is where the challenge lies. And so I think it is imperative that when new information comes out, you're as transparent as possible with your staff, which would build their confidence in you, providing them with the most accurate information. So just 2 thoughts to get you started before we watch the video.
Hello, my name is Dr. Leslie Eber, and today we're going to talk about the facts about the COVID-19 vaccine. These slides were created by myself, Tara Rouse, and Erin Vignay. COVID-19 vaccine education, again, it should be relevant, responsive, and dynamic. We want to provide the most accurate information possible to our staff, our residents, and families. And this is a moving target. So the first thing I'm going to recommend is a strategy and a plan for updating the information that we have in this module. Making a plan with your medical director, infectious control expert, or provider can help you keep up to date as things change with our knowledge about the COVID-19 vaccines. Having a plan like this is really imperative to give staff and our residents and family members up-to-date information. Here are some of the current facts as they are known right now about the 3 COVID-19 vaccines that have been approved in the United States, the Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. And you'll notice the age for the Pfizer vaccine is now 12 years old and up. We talk about the dosage and then the efficacy. How well are these vaccines working for us? And they're pretty remarkable. In elderly persons, we have a Pfizer vaccine that is 94.7% effective, the Moderna 86.4% protective, and Johnson & Johnson 66.2% effective. But the most important thing here is the data on severe disease and COVID-19 death, which is truly remarkable. We also have continuing and growing information on how these vaccines are effective against the current variants. Again, this is going to be a moving target. We already know of 3 different variants in India, and we'll see new variants as time goes on. We'll have to collect new data and find out how each of these vaccines respond to these variants. Here is some information for the UK variant, the B117, the South African variant, the B1351, and the Brazilian variant, the P1. As we can see, we have all three of the vaccines being effective against these variants. We are looking forward to more data for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine against the variants, but the World Health Organization has just published that, again, these vaccines are very effective against the variants of concern. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine trial happened when the South African variant and the UK variant were really apparent and very prevalent in those trials. So we have real world data for the Johnson & Johnson vaccines, which is incredibly helpful. We still get questions about how quickly will I be protected when I take the COVID-19 vaccine, and how long will that protection last? It's really important, again, to be as accurate as possible. If you don't know the answer to one of these questions, don't freestyle it. Ask your medical director, a provider, an infectious disease expert. Make sure we're giving accurate information. So you are protected 2 weeks after the second dose from the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, and 2 weeks after the single dose for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And the most current data shows that you're protected for at least 6 months, not only 6 months, but at least. And every month we are learning more about how long this protection will last. Right now, we don't have an endpoint. We don't know how long the protection from these vaccines will last. And many different vaccine producers are already developing booster shots, and that includes Pfizer and Moderna. And those booster shots are actually already being tested as well. So we don't know if we will need a booster, but if we do, we are going to have them available. Here are the most common side effects for Pfizer, Moderna, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. And it's really important to prepare people to what they should be expecting and to be honest and upfront. These side effects are most common with the second doses of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, and they include fever, headache, fatigue, and pain at the injection site. When Pfizer and Moderna were first released, we heard a lot about anaphylaxis, but in the end, it became clear that it's not that common. And so it's very helpful to review how often we see anaphylaxis. For the Pfizer vaccine, it's 4.7 cases per million. And for the Moderna, it's 2.5 cases per million. And often these cases are in people who have already had allergic reactions to other vaccines. So let's talk about the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine and blood clots. And this was a significant concern when this pause happened on April 13th, 2021. The CDC and FDA realized that we had a safety signal for some blood clots. Our safety signals and our metrics for monitoring safety for all the COVID-19 vaccines work very well, and we see that here. The CDC Advisory Board, the ACIP, reviewed all the data for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and any cases of blood clots. And they realized that on April 23rd, they had enough data to say that these vaccines are safe for the whole population, but they did add some extra information to notify women about this rare complication, specifically women between 18 and 49. When we look at the incidence of these blood clots, how often do they happen with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? It's 1.9 per million doses. And in women less than 50 years old, it's 7 per million, not very common. It's important that people know about the symptoms that we should look for, including severe headache, back pain, severe abdominal pain, shortness of breath, leg swelling, a new red rash, and easy bruising. But the take-home message here, which is really imperative, is the risk of getting a blood clot with a COVID-19 infection is far greater than the risk of getting a blood clot with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Here's some more information about the storage and distribution and dilution of these vaccines. And again, this information also changes. So this is a snapshot, but as we know, it may be that the Pfizer vaccine can be stored at warmer temperatures, and we will learn things every month about how stable each one of these vaccines are and their storage capacity. So I encourage you to look at this chart and then look at the EUA and the CDC for further details. Here are some actionable items and steps that you can do with your cohort, and I encourage you to talk about the most effective way to spread honest, clear, and accurate information about the COVID-19 vaccine to your facility and also to the community. And here are some discussion items that you can go through your ECHO cohort to talk about how to disseminate information effectively and accurately. Thank you very much.
As always, guys, these videos are available on the website, so you can go back and look at those actionable items that you may want to be prepared for moving forward, and really take a step back and think about how you're getting your information and how you're disseminating it to those who need it.
Michelle, I believe this was a tool that you shared with us yesterday.
Yeah, I was just going to try and grab there we go, grabbing the email address or the URL. This is something that came out in McKnight's, I think on Monday. And so it just seemed really neat. I thought I would just pass it along. It's an online simulation tool that can help facilities calculate their risk for COVID infections in their facilities. You just input different numbers of staff, a variety of the shifts that they work, the data on vaccinated employees and residents, put in different types of interactions, and it can help predict infection rates, is my understanding. I don't know anything more than just what's on this, was in this McKnight's article, but I thought I would share it in case you guys didn't see it and wanted to try it. And I just stuck the link in there. And then I guess I can go on to the next section on staff morale. We can go to the next slide there. And so in our discussions with our peer mentors, the next PIP topic that was chosen to work on is staff morale. So we are highlighting this IHI white paper and tool called the Framework for Improving Joy in Work. Jean, can you put the link in chat there too? And I don't know if those, I did try and have those sent out ahead of time, but I was really late in getting my stuff to Sarah.
No, Casey was able to do it, I believe.
Okay, great.
So you guys should have those in your inbox.
So this tool is intended to serve as a guide for healthcare organizations to engage in a process where leaders ask their colleagues at all levels of the organization what matters to you. This is to enable them to better understand the barriers to joy in work and to co-create together meaningful, high leverage strategies to address these issues. The foreword of this document was written by Dr. Don Berwick, who I am a huge fan of. He was the former president of IHI. He was also the former leader of CMS, and he's just really a great advocate for healthcare. He starts out with, in the foreword, the first thing he says is, okay, I admit it, joy in work sounds flaky, which got my attention right away because that is kind of what you all think. But he goes through this whole commentary and he reminds us that you cannot give what you do not have. And we're working in healthcare. The gifts of hope and confidence and safety in healthcare should offer patients and families. We need that to be able to offer to families. And that can only come from a workforce that feels hopeful, confident, and safe. joy in work is an essential resource for the enterprise of healing, which I thought was just kind of a neat statement. The white paper, I've got just the highlights there. It describes the importance of joy in work, or the why, 4 steps leaders can take to improve joy in work, or the how, the IHI framework for improving joy in work, and that's the what, key change ideas for improving joy in work, along with examples from organizations that help test them. And so that's kind of a whole list of interventions that we can use in our PDSAs. And of course, they also offer measurement and assessment tools, which is another part of the science of improvement. They've got it all built into this framework. We have just a short video that kind of just is from IHI that we're going to share next, highlighting those.
Hi, I'm Jessica Perlow, a director at IHI and co-author on IHI's white paper, IHI Framework for Improving Joy in Work. As IHI engaged with partners in thinking about how to restore, foster, and nurture joy in the healthcare workforce, it became evident that leaders often find it challenging to see a way to move from our current state to joy in work. It's not as simple as flipping a switch. So today, I'm going to share 4 steps leaders can take to find a path forward. We chose to use a staircase to represent the components of this model to illustrate that each step serves as the foundation for the steps that follow. First, at the bottom, leaders engage colleagues to identify what matters to them in their work. This step is about asking the right questions and really listening to the answers. It's about doing something with and not for each other. And it helps us to identify what contributes to or detracts from joy in work for staff. Next, leaders identify the processes, issues, or circumstances that are impediments to what matters, the pebbles in the shoes that get in the way of meeting professional, social, and psychological needs. Step 1 and 2 usually happen in the same conversation and continue over time. Having conversations about what really matters to each person builds the trust needed to identify frustrations they experience during the workday. It may sound obvious, but one truth that stood out to us in this research: everyone must feel like their ideas, opinions, and comments will be listened to before they can be open and honest. Then, step 3. In partnership, multidisciplinary teams, when possible, come together and need to share responsibility for removing these impediments and for improving and sustaining joy. Making a workplace joyful is the job of leaders, but everyone from senior executive leaders to clinical and administrative staff has a role to play. From creating effective systems to building teams to bolstering one's own resilience and supporting a positive culture, each person contributes. Lastly, we encourage leaders and staff to use improvement science together to accelerate improvement and create a more joyful and productive place to work. Why is this last step so important? Using principles of improvement science, organizations can determine if the changes they test are leading to improvement, if they're effective in different programs, departments, clinics, and if they're sustainable. These 4 steps do not ignore the larger organizational issues that exist, things like the impact of the EHR functionality on clinicians' daily work or workload and staffing issues. Instead, the steps empower local teams to identify and address impediments that they can change. This process converts the conversation from "if only they would" to "what can we do today?" It helps everyone see the organization as an us, not a them. I invite you to learn more about IHI's Framework for Joy in Work and the critical role that leaders can play by downloading the free white paper on IHI.org.
Okay, we can go to the next slide. And so Jean and I met and kind of came up with a sample PIP that we also sent out right before our session today. Just using this same framework from our GP Quinn template, which I've linked there. I've also linked the CMS QAPI tools that have much more in-depth and detailed worksheets in there. You can use whatever kind of format you prefer, but I did put a sample together that I sent out. Just showing, our key area for improvement, where this is looking at staff morale and looking at a goal. So to improve that employee joy in work, I just randomly threw some numbers in here, 15% in 3 months. And you can evidence this by comparing the pre and the post assessments. there's just a spot where you can find some more of those assessments that I'll go into in the next slide. As far as our root cause analysis, now she was just talking about those steps that we do. And so the first one is what matters to you. And the second one is what are the impediments to that joy? And so that is actually where you gather your information for your root cause analysis. We can go to the next slide. This is what the back page of the PIP document looks like. And I just, again, added in some thoughts, but you can do this however you feel works for you. But I just added in some steps that go into this PDSA here. First, gather your PIP team together and take a look at that IHI framework. And I know you don't have hours to set aside to reading here. So what we thought was just start at page 9, where it tells you how to get ready and how to do those first 2 steps of asking what matters to you and what are the impediments to that work. That would be our good starting place here. The whole document is really good, but we wanted to just make it even briefer. I believe that many of you already do an annual staff satisfaction survey, something like, with a vendor like Pinnacle or something like that. And so ideally, if you already have that, that's where we can start our data from, and put that down under the Study Act portion there, where we collect that data of what our staff satisfaction survey assessments have been. If you don't have staff satisfaction surveys done, I've given a link here where CMS has actually developed a toolkit to evaluate staff satisfaction. Additionally, there is a whole bunch of other examples in this framework document under Appendix C. So if you don't have that staff satisfaction stuff already done, this will make this a longer PIP. If you do have it, you're a step ahead. So that's what we were hoping that a lot of you would already have. And so, Jean, if you wanted to just mention a few things about starting the conversations.
Yep, I can do that. So actually, a lot of the information that I planned to go over was part of the little video that we just saw. But as Michelle has mentioned, that the root cause analysis and the PIP comes from the IHI framework for improving joy in work. And I'll just guide you to where the information is that I'm going to go over today in that document. It's in Appendix A on page 23. But if you use this as your guide, steps 1 and 2 for root cause analysis, I guarantee you that this is probably going to be the easiest, most effective root cause analysis that you've ever done, because it's laid out so beautifully. So in this step in the PIP, you're going to be asking, it's all about, as she said in the video, asking the right questions and really listening to the answers, because this is what's going to contribute to understanding what contributes to or distracts from joy in work in your facility. The conversations that you have can be held but with individuals, or they can be held in small groups. I think that it's really recommended that they be small group conversations because of the comfort level that's achieved in that type of setting. And what you do is begin by explaining the purpose of the conversation. Be very careful to articulate why you're talking about joy in work. And in your case, we're going to be doing this because we want to boost staff morale. So emphasize that. And also emphasize that it's about ongoing improvement. This isn't going to be a one and done conversation, that you will be circling back with solutions and for further input and so on and so forth as this whole conversation evolves. So in this step, as mentioned earlier, you want to ask the staff, what matters to you by building on assets. So you're first going to look at the positives, if you will. And in the document that I'm referencing, there are a plethora of questions that are available to guide this conversation. I think there are two key ones though, and that is asking your staff members, what matters to you in your work? You know, it's an open-ended, or it's a question that they can't answer yes or no to. It's an open-ended question where they have to really provide their own insight into that. Or ask them, what makes a good day for you? It can be just as very simple as that. The importance of these questions is don't assume that when you ask this question in a small group that everybody's going to hop on board. You're going to have some laggards, some people who really kind of hold back from sharing. But from the responses that you ask, if you use follow-up questions or paraphrase the assets that are highlighted in the conversation, this is apt to draw some of the persons who are being a little bit more quiet out so that they're open to sharing as well. So then you move on to what impedes joy in work. So this is going to focus a little bit more on the negative. It's usually best to have this conversation at the same time. So it's a continuation of the conversation that you've started by asking what matters to you. And again, as she mentioned in the video, it's very important for the staff to feel like their opinions and ideas will be listened to. And you can do this by paraphrasing the concerns that they bring to the table, or the negatives that they bring to the table, to be sure that you have a complete understanding of what they're really trying to tell you. By hearing what impedes joy in work, you're going to get a list of concerns that will really help you prioritize and determine where you want to begin to lift staff morale in your facility. So if you're doing this in a group and one individual in the group seems to be dominating the conversation, I think it's important to back everybody up, thank them for their input, but try to draw information out of others in the group as well. I mentioned already rephrasing concerns to clarify understanding. The information that you capture should be documented somewhere and shared with staff, made available to all staff so that they can see the outcome of the initial conversation, and then this should be built on so that they can see what you're doing with the information that you've gleaned from them. And it's also important to draw staff into helping come to some conclusions or to find answers or interventions. Often the answers are right there in the room. So, you know, include everybody in trying to get the ball rolling as far as improvement goes. I really stumbled there at the end, but that's all I have right now. Does anybody have questions, or team, do you have anything to add to this? Kelly, you always have such good real life examples from your experience in your work.
Oh, I think this is a great white paper. I actually haven't seen this one yet, so I'm going to go back and read it, because just the highlights that you put out there are very interesting to me. And I think that your PIP to get started is going to be very helpful to the participants to move forward. And just to reiterate, it's key that you really drill down on that root cause analysis to determine what their barriers are and what makes them feel good, because you can put 1 million employee appreciation or 1 million more employee morale programs in place, but if it's not something that's really addressing the needs of your staff, then you're spinning your wheels. So
very true.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly, and thanks, Jean.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next step really is to start that root cause analysis, which is doing the conversations. And we're just suggesting you start really small with this. Just start with 10 individuals or even 5, whatever makes sense for you and your teams, and start gathering that information. I did pull together a very simple worksheet to collect your notes on that went out with the other documents. Our next little video is on how to start those conversations. So I'll turn it back over to Casey.
Hi, I'm Jessica Perlow, a director at IHI and co-author on IHI's white paper, IHI Framework for Improving Joy in Work. For many years, IHI has been promoting the transformative provocation to ask patients what matters to you. in addition to what's the matter. Healthcare leaders need to ask healthcare workforce the same question. Only by understanding what truly matters to their staff will senior management be able to identify and remove barriers to joy. It sounds easy enough. A four-word question: what matters to you? But the conversations we learned in crafting this white paper aren't easy at all. First, prepare for these what matters to you conversations. Be mindful and plan before you ask this powerful question. These are rich, learning conversations, not intended to communicate information, but rather to listen and learn. Leaders are often ill-equipped to have effective conversations with colleagues, and many put off these important dialogues because of two primary concerns. One, what if colleagues ask for things I can't do? And two, how am I going to fix all of the things that they identify? Leaders rightly fear an avalanche of issues falling on them, and they're unable to address them effectively. Recognize that this is a different approach than the usual, I tell you what isn't working and you fix it approach. Second, ensure leader capacity at all levels of the organization. Leaders at a local level, think program, department, or clinic, a group we refer to as the core leaders in the white paper, are tasked with guiding the work to improve joy in work in their respective areas. These leaders need the capacity, that is, the time to do the work and improvement science skills, and skill to facilitate these what matters to you conversations and to act on the issues that surface. Not acting on the impediments can intensify staff cynicism. So during prototype testing that provided examples for our white paper, we were delighted to see that sites found that they could begin tests of change on some local impediments almost immediately, especially if they broke these down into smaller segments. Sites that made progress on reaching their aims designated skilled and committed core leaders who facilitated improvement immediately, rather than waiting for an external resource team. Lastly, designate a senior leader champion. Joy in Work should be an organization-wide strategy led by senior leaders and involving colleagues and leaders at all levels. Core leaders need to have at least one senior leader as a champion when issues arise that go beyond the scope of their local leadership. The champion also takes on the boulders, the things that are too big for a local unit, and begins to address them in the larger organization. A quick example to illustrate the point. IHI interviewed a few organizations outside of healthcare that have done these 3 steps well. Howard Baer, a former president of Starbucks Coffee Company, shared that listening and ensuring people feel heard has been the cornerstone of their work. Leaders can't always do something to improve the problem, but they can listen and try, Baer said. The tension goes away as soon as people feel like their feedback is valued. One way Starbucks did this was through mission review cards. So every employee was given a postcard-sized card and encouraged to report any decision that did not, in their opinion, support the company's mission statement to this mission review team. And employees were guaranteed to receive a response from leadership within 2 weeks. By beginning with asking what matters, leaders engage in a form of appreciative inquiry that taps into strengths or bright spots, or what's already working in the organization that offer energy for change. So by beginning with asking what matters, leaders engage in a form of appreciative inquiry that taps into strengths or bright spots or what's already working in the organization that offer energy for change. I invite you to learn more by downloading our white paper, which is free on ihi.org.
Okay. Jean, I guess we'll turn it back over to you.
So yesterday, Dr. Jurovich contacted me and asked me if I would be willing to do this presentation for him. So I'll do the best that I can to articulate the thoughts that he had around this. But the following slides address evolving policies and thoughts around COVID-19 vaccinations. So we all know that there's been an awful lot of conversation and press around the recent rise in COVID-19 cases. Just last night on CBS, I heard that Louisiana's 8 state prisons have suspended visitation and volunteering in response to their state's surge in COVID-19 cases. And apparently the Delta variant has pushed cases and hospitalizations to record numbers in their state. They reported that one of the largest hospitals in the state has already been very proactive suspended non-urgent and surgical cases, so they have additional beds and staff to address the surging cases. And the governor went on to report that 90% of the current COVID hospitalizations are unvaccinated patients. So that's the springboard for the presentation today. Next slide, please. Not surprising, we're also hearing that unvaccinated nursing home staff are being linked to COVID-19 outbreaks in facilities across the country. CMS reports that roughly 57% of nursing home staff have been vaccinated compared to 80% of residents. So some examples of what's going on in the nursing home community now around the country are at one facility in Grand Junction, Colorado, 16 residents were infected and they had 4 deaths. That was just recently. In Indiana, 7 residents died at a facility where less than half of the staff were fully vaccinated. And I think what you really need to keep in mind here is that fully vaccinated older adults are still at higher risk of infection than the general population because they have weaker immune systems. So the importance of vaccinating staff and residents is just cannot be overstated. And these examples and many more are fueling the continued vaccination effort with a renewed sense of energy or urgency across the state. Next slide, please. Action is being taken by many systems and organizations. The Associated Press reported recently that the VA now mandates that all employees get the COVID-19 vaccination. Next slide, please. And states are jumping on the bandwagon as well. California and New York City recently created new policies for state and city employees regarding vaccination status in mandatory Texas. I know in California, in an attempt to slow down the rising infections among the unvaccinated, they're putting into place a policy that becomes effective next month that requires proof of vaccination for state workers and for all healthcare workers. And those who don't show proof of vaccination will have to undergo weekly testing or even more frequent testing than that. So I thought that's a good example of what's going on. Next slide, please. There are now well over 41 health systems across the country that are putting in place plans to require vaccinations for their workforce. And I know we've seen a lot in the press about the pushback that they're getting on this from some of their employees. Nonetheless, it's a good policy to have in place. Next slide, please. So drivers for vaccinations in health systems include, number one, the impact on staffing. So the lost time of infected staff puts added pressure on the remaining staff, really making it difficult for them to complete their job and to do it with their chins up. This lost productivity reduces revenue, and this often includes revenue to support staff. And finally, and probably most importantly, reduced staffing impacts the quality of care that they're able to deliver to their patients and residents. Next slide, please. It's feasible to predict that legal issues will evolve from all of this. At this point, there are currently no processes in place by the government to prosecute or penalize facilities, but it's anticipated that this could change moving forward. Next slide, please. There are also personnel issues that are associated with the unvaccinated. The decision to not receive a vaccination has unintended implications. So I've already mentioned the stress that it puts on your coworkers, but it also really shows a lack of concern or consideration for others, especially those in the vulnerable population that we serve. And it's safe to say that unvaccinated staff cannot be regarded as altruistic. I thought that was interesting, coming from Dr. Jurevich. This is really unfortunate because altruism is a key characteristic of high quality healthcare and high quality organizations. Next slide, please. So I mentioned there are obvious implications associated with the unvaccinated. If you recall back to the early phase of the pandemic, the biggest spread of COVID-19 was healthcare workers who infected family, friends, and colleagues. I think that this really highlights, as these numbers are starting to increase again, the need to optimize our infection control practices and to include vaccinations in this. Next slide, please. So as healthcare workers, we have an obligation to protect our residents and all of those around us. Healthcare systems are becoming intolerant to the implications created by the unvaccinated and the potential liability that could be incurred. And on the next slide, Dr. Jurovich provided a list of options for managing the unvaccinated. I would, suggest that these be tried after you've shared all the information that you have that's available, and after you've tried all of the more gentler approaches, I'll say. So the first suggestion was pay increases for vaccinated staff only, and to be sure to advertise this or voice this within the facility. Another thought is to require unvaccinated employees to be tested at least weekly, and I don't think that that's unreasonable at all. As attrition does its duty, slowly replace unvaccinated staff with more committed people. I think that that'll be one of the easier things to do as well. And then a little harsher is incentivizing medical directors and DONs to achieve 90% staff vaccination rates, which I haven't seen that happening yet, but it could. And then to celebrate every unvaccinated convert. So for example, when somebody does become fully vaccinated after objecting to provide free lunch for the facility, or ice cream treats or something, some type of positive reinforcement. So we'll move on to the next slide. And I know that this has been a little bit more on the didactic side today, but what we would like everybody to do is to share a list of your ideas for improving vaccinations among staff in your facility. We've heard some good ideas, and we've also heard some real horror stories about those persons who are refusing to be vaccinated and their response to their leadership. So please share your responses in chat.
I just wanted to share a story really quick as far as trying to get folks vaccinated. I'm working with one facility in particular that is in one of the counties that is a struggle, to say the least, and they have multiple nursing homes. So they are working with the local health department to get some sort of mobile vaccine clinic to drive from facility to facility, followed by a food truck or a snow cone truck or an ice or something, for convenience purposes. I think that the struggle I'm understanding from him is he can schedule his pharmacy to come out and provide the vaccines, but he has to have 5 people that are truly committed in order to bring the vial to their facility. So then it is at the responsibility of the staff to physically go out to a local pharmacy or a clinic somewhere and get the vaccination. And so I think you also, if you're struggling in this, is find a way to make it the most convenient for your staff to get vaccinated without them necessarily committing before. But I mean, if they can easily walk by, hey, I'm going to go grab my snow cone. Oh, well, let me just go ahead and get my shot too while I'm here. So just trying to think outside of the box and finding easier ways. This particular facility said, he goes, I'm even offering to drive them to CVS to get their, and pay them while they're on the clock to get their vaccine. But the struggle is they may be working 2 jobs, and I got off at 2 o'clock and I got to get over to my next facility at 2:15. But if there's something in their parking lot and it's very easily accessible, then you may be able to get some turn too. So just an idea. I will update you guys to see if this was successful or not, but it's a new idea to try.
Yeah, I agree that the more convenient you make it for everybody, the more apt they are to do it. I just saw in the news last night that at our state fair is going on right now here in town, and they have a van out at the fairgrounds where they're vaccinating people who, but they're also testing anybody who wants to stop in and be tested. So it couldn't be any more convenient than that.
I went through the airport just a few days ago, and as I walked through the baggage claim area, there's a huge clinic right there, and I was like, well, isn't that convenient? So there are ways to make it more convenient. for folks, and it may not be I have to entice them with money or snacks or anything like that, but I really just don't have time to do it. And if I commit to do it and then the vaccine comes in, maybe I'm sick that day and I can't go in or whatever. So I think it's harder for people to commit than to just see something and just do it.